Okay, so welcome everybody to the first day of the Psychi Research Symposium. We're doing something a little different this year. We're just going to be focusing on the dissertation. So we decided to kind of spread this out over 3 days for 3 weeks. And so today we have our lovely panelists. And this is Zach here. So before I introduce everybody, just as a refresh or kind of introduction of what we will be talking about, is picking a topic and narrowing in on the topic. So any sort of like tips or tricks. Just a quick overview of qualitative and quantitative research, getting started in terms of basics, what even is a dissertation, and how to come up with a topic. So again, kind of picking one and narrowing it. So our panelists today that have so lovely volunteered to help out are Stephanie, she's our librarian, or one of the librarians, Dr. Cusick, and Reba, who's am I introducing? I'm introducing. You're introducing. And then Zach. I did. My name is Emily. I am the chair and hopefully gonna be the moderator. So. The process of this is, so essentially, like if you have any questions or concerns, then this is what the panel is there for. Otherwise, everyone kind of has their own talking points and what they want to bring to the session. And if we kind of dip into a lull, I have some questions as well that we can ask the panel. So if you have any questions throughout, I don't know what's going to be the easiest because we do have some people on Zoom. If we want to raise our hands or something like that to chime in so that we're not speaking over each other. I guess we can figure that out as we go. All right, so to get started, do we want to start as a panel first?
I'm going to kick it off and just talk about, so first, thanks for coming. Thanks to all of you who will watch the recording later. I'm just going to do like a quick overview of what actually is a dissertation and kind of walk you all through the process. So essentially, a dissertation is just a large research project. It's often the culmination of years of academic work and graduate study. And the idea is where the writer, so the doctoral student, is basically showing that they can do research independently, that they can come up with an original research idea that then sort of contributes to the broader field in a unique way. It is, as I'm sure the students here and Stephanie as well can say, it's a very rigorous process. It does require a lot of time and dedication. A lot of the process is also like being able to demonstrate critical thinking skills when it comes to digesting the literature and strong academic writing. So in terms of the specific requirements, it's often, while it might vary depending on if you're in a PsyD or a PhD program, the structure tends to be pretty similar. So I'm going to kind of break it down by chapter. So typically a dissertation has 5 chapters. Sometimes it's helpful if you're in the process to think about it as like 5 papers that you essentially have to write. But I'm going to, just because my knowledge about the process is specific to MSP, both as a past student and going through the process and as a faculty member. So this process that I'm going to describe is specific to MSP, but again, the structures tend to be pretty similar. So first year doctoral students early in the program are sort of encouraged right away to start thinking about a topic that you might want to research, thinking about a topic that you're passionate about, but also keeping in mind how will my research, how will my topic specifically kind of, again, uniquely contribute to the field, because you don't want to replicate a study that's already been done. And in terms of choosing the topic, our other panelists are going to talk kind of tips and tricks on how to do that. So at MSP, we actually have classes that are associated with the process. And so even though there's chapters 1 through 5, you start writing your chapter 2 first before anything else. And so we have a class, it's the 3rd semester of the 1st year. And this is just prep 1, and you start writing your literature review. So you have sort of, in the process, you're narrowing your question, and then you are going through the literature specific to your question. You're kind of synthesizing, critiquing the literature, you're evaluating it, and seeing, you know, what's known, what's not known about the topic, pulling in often like classical or contemporary theories. And then also in that class, you go through the process of selecting your dissertation committee, which I'll just say briefly with that, that's usually involves 3 people. So your chair, who's the person that you work with the most and early on, and that is an MSP faculty member. Your advisor is also an MSP faculty member, and then your external consultant is usually it's a psychologist, someone with a doctoral degree outside of MSP. And the idea for forming your committee is choosing people that that have some sort of expertise or knowledge in your topic and or the methodology that you're using. And so from there, you hopefully leave that class with a pretty good solid chapter 2, at least, you know, we'll say 50 to 75% done. It really depends. And then starting 2nd year, 1st semester, you have your Disc Prep 2 class. And so here is where you're working on your chapter 3, which is your methods. So what kind of research design are you using? What's the reason for that? What's the theoretical underpinnings of that research design? You're also choosing at this point, like, are you doing, or actually you probably want to choose this in earlier on, but is your methodology qual or is it quant? And then there's other ones too. You could do mixed methods. And then we're introducing some other options this year. But you're also thinking about, so not just the like historical theoretical foundations of your model, of your research design, but who are you wanting to get information from? Who are you studying essentially? So what is the inclusion exclusion criteria for your participants? How do you plan to recruit them? What's the threshold for that? So for a lot of quantitative studies, that could be hundreds and hundreds of people. For qualitative studies, it's usually 10 to 12, sometimes 8 to 12 people. So thinking about that and then basically providing like a step-by-step sort of outline of how you are going to do your recruitment and data analysis. So with these 2 classes, you know, you have hopefully again a pretty solid chapter 2 and 3, and then independent of that, you would need to write your chapter 1. And chapter 1 it's a shorter chapter. It sort of introduces your research question. It talks about what's the clinical or the social relevance, sometimes the personal relevance of the topic, as well as sort of defining your terms. And then, so that's sort of done, again, independent. We don't have there's not a class on that anymore, but the idea is once you have your solid 3 chapters, once your chair, your advisor, your consultant has signed off on all of them, and again, in this process, there's often many edits back and forth and revisions. The idea is to get to your proposal meeting. So this is a more formal meeting with you as a student and your committee members. And you're basically proposing, this is what I want to go do. Here's the reasons why, here's how I'm going to do it. And the idea is once you pass proposal, you're still not allowed to actually go out and collect your data yet. The next step, so the proposal meeting is a really big step. It's a really, it takes a lot to get to that process. Following that, once you pass proposal, you submit your IRB application, and this is to the Institutional Review Board. So with IRB, basically, again, they're looking at, are there any ethical considerations or concerns? How are you going to keep your participants safe at this point? Once you then have passed your IRB, you're free to, you are really working independently at this point. Not that you're not like checking in with your chair if you have questions or concerns about anything. But at this point, you're collecting your data and then you're analyzing your data. This can often be a time-consuming process, but you've already sort of designed in your chapter 3, like this is how I'm going to do the process. Some of the, I would say, pitfalls maybe here that could come up is just having difficulty finding participants and sometimes having to like widen that net. But then in terms of the last 2 chapters, so once you're done with data collection and data analysis, and again, what that looks like is what, depending on your research design. Once you're done, your chapter 4 is basically presenting the findings. So for a quant study, this might be a shorter chapter with graphs and you know, all that statistical information. It's typically a pretty lengthy chapter for qualitative models, just because you're talking about what are the themes or narratives. So there's lots of quotes and things like that involved. And then chapter 5 is okay, here I presented my findings in chapter 4. This is what my research found. And then you're kind of bringing it all together. So what are the implications then of your findings in terms of in relation to the existing literature, that the maybe future recommendations for research, limitations, if there were, inherently every research study has limitations, so talking about what those were, and then sort of synthesizing it all together. And at that point, then you do, again, your second formal meeting, which is your defense meeting. Sometimes people, so you'll always have your committee there. Sometimes people like to invite friends and family to come to that as well. And you, again, you kind of present from start to finish what you've done, and you're at this point defending your research. Once you pass that, there's a couple more steps, but essentially you defend it and you are sending it off for last minute sort of edits, and then it gets published. And then a lot of chairs require you to take your dissertation research and then condense it and create an article that you're going to submit to a peer-reviewed journal. We'll talk about that and we'll talk more about proposal in the day 2, but we'll also talk about the turning it into an article in on the last day of the symposium. So, okay. Hit the main points. So
yeah, it's a fantastic overview.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you. So do we have any questions in the audience at all? That was a lot of information. Thank you, Dr. Cusick.
You're welcome.
Yeah. No. So what makes a good dissertation topic?
And go. I think anything that like excites you is a good dissertation topic. So when thinking about my own dissertation, I had a few things that kind of floated around in my head, or that like I had written down that I was interested in. I think ultimately what led me to my topic was, for me at least, and it doesn't have to be for everybody, but for me it was like a very personal topic. It was something that I wanted to know more about. And so I think if it's something that you are genuinely interested in, like that alone can make it a good topic. I think like obviously we'll talk about a little bit more like narrowing down the topic, and that makes it a good topic too. Like Dr. Cusick said, you don't want to duplicate something that's already been done. But I just think generally speaking, it has to be something that you are actually passionate about, something you care about. You're going to spend a lot of time with the topic. You're going to become an expert on it essentially. And so if you are not interested in it, if you see yourself becoming bored with it, maybe rethinking like what it is you want to do, because it's really like your little buddy that you have to carry around everywhere, like, which can be very emotionally taxing too. So like that's something to consider as well. Like mentally, what is your capacity to do a topic that is close to you? But I think that is where like picking your chair and your advisor and your external consultant is really important, because Dr. Cusick's my chair. I picked her very specifically because I had her for a couple of years as a professor. I knew that she would be someone I could lean on. And so just a lot of things to consider in that regard, but yeah.
Yeah. All right. Did you have an answer?
I'm sure you do. I echo everything that Reba says. I think the thing that stands out to me is, yes, you want something that you're passionate about and interested in.
I know.
But one thing that was important to me as I narrowed down my topic, actually two things. Firstly, yes, you want to be passionate and interested in it because you're going to spend 3-4 years with it, but it can't be your end all be all capstone or something that you're thinking about and you're rigid in your thinking. Inherently throughout the dissertation process that Dr. Cusick described, it's a very long process. You're working with multiple parties, so you have to be engaged in the material enough, but you also have to have an open mind to be able to see what the literature says, take consideration and revisions from your chair and your committee. So being able to kind of adapt and change your mindset to whatever your specific topic is. I think the other thing that was really important for me when I was narrowing down the process as well is future career goals. So I want to ultimately be within the field of neuropsych or health psychology. So I tailored my topic and methodology around that because, as Reba said, you spend 3-4 years throughout this, and by the end of the process, you are inherently or considered an expert. So if it's something that you know where you want to be post graduation, and you can tailor your dissertation to that, that can also show that you've put extra effort, time, and are a quote unquote expert within that subset of the field. Which was really important to me going into neuropsych and health psych in the future.
So if I'm hearing you both correctly, it's not necessarily like choosing a topic that you're passionate about only. Like you said, you have to also consider, am I going to be able to be married to this and emotionally involved in this throughout the process, but also kind of navigating, is this something that I want in the future, a part of the discipline?
100%.
Anything to add?
I think I would add to that one of the things that I think students often worry about is that they're going to start their process, pick their topic, get to their research question, and then a year down the line, somebody publishes something exactly like they want to do. Yeah. And I always say that that's not a worry, that, no matter what the study is, it's not going to exactly be what your topic is going to be on. Maybe they did a slightly different population, or it was in a different, area of the world, or if there was something else, but your dissertation is going to be unique because you are bringing your experience to it and your writing style and the area that you want to explore. So
I can speak more on that.
Yeah,
as well.
I think that is.
Yeah, I can speak more on that as well. I wanted to do concussion research within college athletes, specifically looking at personality, social support, things like that. And early on in the process, I was a male athlete within college, and I wanted to do male athletes. And throughout the process, I found that there was a lot of research that was done on male college athletes related to concussions or mild TBIs. And so I kind of shifted. I didn't have a full panic, but at the same time, I was like, okay, where am I going to go from here? I'm stuck. There's a lot of research on this population. What do I do? So throughout kind of refining my question, after I had my question, I found that there's little to no research on female college athletes, specifically looking with validated or longer forms of personality inventories. So those two big shifts that I had from my original research question helped me narrow my focus and then also kind of carve a niche while also creating original or something of my own research. So it kind of, once again, loving or being invested in the topic, but then also being able to shift and adapt based on what's out there, what comes up. If someone publishes a groundbreaking article doing exactly what you're doing a month before you do, like being able to adapt and change throughout that process as well. So that was kind of my shift And I'm extremely happy and I'm really excited to continue to move forward with this.
How did you identify that there was like the other gaps that were into the literature to narrow down the topic?
I think this kind of goes, and maybe we'll get to it later when we're talking about finding a research question, but you spend a lot of time as you have kind of these these ideas, what are you interested in, what are you passionate about, and then you talk to people. These are communities, events, symposiums like this, and then another big part of that is just going in the literature. And you spend a lot of time within the literature, seeing what's out there, seeing how it's been done. So then kind of the combination of you're interested in it, you're talking to people, you surround yourself within these groups, and then also you spend the time looking in the literature. You'll soon pick up, especially if you're kind of focusing your literature search, what's out there, how it's been done, and then where can I build upon.
Did you have a similar experience, Reba?
Not particularly. I think this is probably more related to one of your questions. Just in that, like, my initial idea for doing a dissertation was very broad.
Yeah.
And so it was just like narrowing down what was missing in the literature, which Stephanie was very helpful with. Because my initial idea was like just in the realm of childhood trauma, but there's obviously a ton of research on that. So it was like, what specifically in that area do I want to research? What population? And so, yeah, it was more so just kind of narrowing down. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of gaps in my topic, so it was kind of easy to pinpoint.
I guess that's the other thing too, right, is like you both are saying, like, go through the literature, make sense of it, and then find the gaps.
Yeah.
As you both said, there are gaps. There are going to be huge holes sometimes in the literature that provide the opportunity to
I also might be a little biased, but I'm doing a quantitative study and Reba's doing qualitative. I would say you have to dig a little bit harder in the quantitative realm to find the gaps, where my understanding of most qualitative studies, they're highly personalized. So it's like you can kind of carve with your research question what you're interested in, kind of carve that path a little bit easier. I mean, maybe not easier, but it's just kind of a different process.
Yeah, that's my interpretation. I think with quant, there's probably more data, with certain
And
things.
finding what's out there in this.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that's not something I ever really thought about, was the difference of like narrowing or finding gaps based on measurement of. Do either of you have anything to add? Narrowing?
I think maybe you could answer this or at least make sure. I think there's, generally speaking, over the years, there's been a lot more just quantitative type studies done. And even I think a struggle sometimes for qualitative studies to like prove their worth, if you will. I think at least here at MSP, it's about even, and I think there's not that tension between the two, but I think there's just been more quant studies done.
I think that's
Okay.
very true, especially for psychology. I think, coming from working in a medical school for 10 years and coming here 4 years ago, I saw a big transition from everything is quant to actually there's this whole other side of things, which I was already doing some of the qualitative stuff in my own research, but I think MSP especially appreciates both world of research. And I think that's something unique too, that if you're considering, you don't quite know what you want to do for your method, but one of the good things about the way the curriculum is set up is you do have at least one research method class before you get into disc prep. And that way you can kind of get a feel for it. But then during disc prep, you also have simultaneously the qualitative course. So that way you can kind of get a feel of, well, which feels like the better route. And then next year when you get into disc prep 2, that's when you really have to figure it out. But it's definitely an area that you can think about early on in your topic narrowing as you're starting to consider, what do I want to do? What's of more interest to me in terms of designing a study? Because I know people, including myself, are like, no stats for me, thank you.
Yeah.
I would much rather do a qualitative study.
And I think when looking at both the topic and the research question and methods too, there are topics, like depending on what the research question is, that's like don't force this to be qualitative. This is a quant study
Yeah.
and vice versa. And
Yeah.
so that's where I think talking to peers, talking to the librarians, talking to faculty, especially as you're thinking about your topics leading up to Dis Prep 1 and then really kind of fleshing it out in that class. Yeah.
Something I was thinking about when everyone was speaking was this process is so long and can be so grueling because you're doing a lot of reading and interpreting and making sense of things and putting it into your own words. And so we do have to narrow the topic. But then you get into the literature and it's like this huge hug of literature that you need to aggregate in order to get a grasp on what is going on. So maybe speak to that process, like having to narrow and then having to broaden and then having to come back in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does.
Sorry, that wasn't one of the questions I said.
No, that's okay. I mean, I can start if you want. I think like for my topic specifically, so just to state what my topic is so that people know what I'm talking about, it's post-traumatic growth in women who experienced maternal childhood emotional neglect. It's quite a mouthful. But again, going back like to year one, semester one, year one, really, when we're sort of encouraged to begin thinking about what we want to do, and writing down topics. Like I know I have a Word document saved somewhere that is very broad of like the experience of like individuals who had childhood trauma. And then like I did a poster at Division 32 in Albuquerque that was like, I can't remember the title, but it was essentially like physical manifestations of childhood trauma like later in life. And I did that with a colleague. And so then I kind of knew at that point, like I wanted to do more digging into just the arena of childhood trauma. But you're right, when you start digging, you kind of can end up like down a rabbit hole and it can become very confusing of like, well, I'd like to do this, but there's a lot of research on it. And then you're like, okay, but maybe there's a hole here. And then you start looking into that, but then you're like, okay, maybe there is research on this. So like, where do I go from here?
And what am I even interested in?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, how does it evolve essentially? And so for me, it was like, well, one, it was just talking to other classmates about like what they were doing, people who were also doing qualitative dissertations, and kind of that helped me narrow it down a little bit of like, okay, I think I want to do qual. I don't like stats. So like that was helpful. That was an easy decision for me once I took the qual class. But I think beyond that, it was, again, just kind of figuring out like what even falls under the childhood trauma umbrella. And so it was like, okay, abuse, neglect. Yeah, of course. Like we know that. What else is there? And so there's physical abuse, there's emotional abuse, there's physical neglect, emotional neglect. And so then it was kind of from there, like picking like, what am I more interested in out of all of those things? And so for me, it was just a very personal decision because emotional neglect just stood out to me more. I didn't even really know fully what emotional neglect was until I started reading about it. And then I was like, okay, this is definitely it. Like this like reminisces with me the most. So I don't know, it was just kind of like a personal decision, I think. But then beyond that, it's like, okay, then we still have to narrow down population and like, are we just doing experience of emotional neglect or what are we doing? And so that was where talking to faculty members was helpful. So like, I think there were a couple people that helped me narrow in on like childhood emotional neglect. And then I actually had a conversation with Dr. Callan when I was interviewing for chairs and advisors. And anyone that's talked to him knows he'll just like start spitballing ideas to you. And he's just like, he has a lot of ideas, and it's awesome because he's just a really cool person to talk to when you're like, I don't know what to do. So he was the one who gave me the idea of post-traumatic growth, which I had heard that term before, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. I hadn't even considered that I could apply it to emotional neglect. And so that was where I was like, okay, I think I want to do that because one, there's no research really on post-traumatic growth with emotional neglect. Like I can hardly find anything on that. And two, it's kind of like a positive end to what I'm researching. So it's like, it's not just emotional neglect, like people do grow from it. They can move on with their lives and have positive experiences after having childhood emotional neglect. and more specifically like women who had maternal childhood emotional neglect. And that's like, when you look in the literature, there's like nothing on that. I mean, there's maternal childhood emotional neglect, but there's not like women who experience this and have post-traumatic growth. So it was just adding all those little elements in like one by one, like, okay, I think I want to do that, but how do I narrow it down? What am I more interested in? But you're right, it can be a rabbit hole. I mean, I go down rabbit holes all the time with research. It's really hard to like stay on one thing.
Yeah, I was thinking as I was like posing or asking you the question, I know in my own process, narrowing was easy until I started reading.
Yeah.
Right, so I,
Mhm.
yeah.
Definitely.
Do you have a similar?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what Reba said. I think the thing I would not change, but my process was I found we kind of talked about we want to find something we're passionate about. I found that. And then I went to the literature because that's what I was told to do. And then I was overwhelmed.
Sure.
So then it was, okay, I have something I'm interested about. I go to the literature. There's so much out there.
23,000 articles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say, I think I'm also biased in this because I've gone through this program, but MSP is amazing. Disprep 1 is amazing. They force you to look at literature, construct your articles, and think about what you want to do. Stephanie, Dr. Cusick, and other faculty are awesome with having questions and helping you narrow your focus. So that was kind of my process when I felt overwhelmed. I leaned heavily on Stephanie. I leaned heavily on the class and the course structure in Disprep 1. Because throughout this process, and I can't imagine going to a PhD program where they just let you go through
Yeah.
or just free. But throughout this process, they do a great job of supporting you, but then also, for me, Disprep 1 and the start of it is the most overwhelming time. So that's why we're kind of maybe trying to bring this to you guys now, because there's just so much out there. There's so much opportunity. There's so many things that you can look at, but it's all coming at once. So I was very overwhelmed. I would say I leaned on the support structures and of the class, Stephanie, and then talking to faculty, honestly, because I would get down rabbit holes in the literature. I would try to consume it, but then it would just kind of come out like nothing.
Yeah.
So what happened is I'd have more and more conversations with like Dr. Cusick, Stephanie, Dr. Callan, who's my chair now, and essentially just as more of just a sounding board. Okay, I'm saying this information. I saw this throughout the literature. And then they kind of gave stuff back to me. And it was the stuff that they gave back to me that then I was able to refine, refocus, and then kind of direct where I wanted to go. So just kind of that open dialogue and discourse was probably the most helpful for me, because then I was able to go back to the literature. But this time, instead of being overwhelmed, I was able to pinpoint and take out the things that I actually wanted and that I was interested in. So kind of that, those were the two big things for me. And the class structure and then faculty feedback.
Oh, that was a lot. Thank you.
It's a lot. The process is a lot. That's hard to condense it even when you're talking about it.
Yeah, certainly. And I think too, it really speaks to what you had said earlier, Zach, about becoming an expert in your topic. Like, you are required to read so much literature, and you may not be like taking it all in and being able to regurgitate it, but the idea is to understand the topic. Any advice for people kind of coming into this process? Besides, don't do it.
Like just for the intro part and posing the question, or
Yeah.
the whole process. Cool. I don't know what would be more helpful to you guys.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe for today, because today we're focusing on like narrowing, we're focusing on like the difference between a dissertation and other research, and getting started. Maybe just like some advice on how to get started and maybe the anxieties that come with that.
And we do have a couple of PsyD ones that are in week 4 of Disprep, so
Okay.
they might like to hear that perspective from you all.
I mean, at that point, you know, I assume in week 4, like they already are being encouraged to start the lit review process and they have an idea of what they want to write about. If you're not at that point yet, like if you're not in the PsyD program, but you're thinking about it, then I would say just begin writing down what your ideas are. They can be really broad, that's okay. Just documenting them, because I remember so many times like something would pop in my head and I or I'd even like have a dream about a topic. And when I woke up, I would be like, oh, I gotta write that down. And then it'd be like noon and I'd forget. So like, just when you think of something, write it down, because it is, even though it's intriguing you in the moment, it is easy to forget what the idea was. But I think once you're actually in the process of writing the lit review, I mean, like for me, it was like leaning on Stephanie a lot, leaning on, once I had my chair decided, like kind of talking to Dr. Cusick about where to go with it. And honestly, like just as a cohort, I think like the process is really exhausting and difficult. So just being, supportive to one another is really helpful, because it's, even though everyone has a different topic, we're all going through a similar process.
Yeah.
So.
I think for the initial stages, finding something you're interested in. And I know that's like easier said than done. This could be clinical, personal experience, and this goes for quant or qual. Qual are usually very highly personalized and individualized processes and research questions. But my interest came from even before I was in the field of psych, because I've had concussion. Some people look specifically as like, what is the most interesting aspect of their clinical work? Is it a diagnosis? Is it a population? Is things like that, and then kind of going from there. And then when you have the framework of something that's interesting, what else follows that up? These little thought bubbles that maybe Reba mentioned. Okay, so now I'm interested in this process, and then what comes up after that?
Yeah, no, that is very helpful. Even in terms of, if I'm hearing you both correctly, it's like just kind of leaning on your support and leaning into the process. This is a long process, and your first draft is not your final draft. And it's certainly maybe not the draft your chair is going to accept. So maybe talk a little bit about what that is about, and maybe the both of you can chime in as well on this, because you're on the other side of it, where we're submitting things to you.
Garbage on paper. I'm just kidding. Maybe.
I will say, from the course perspective, you, at the end of the first dissertation prep 1 class, the expectation is to have a decent 22-ish page. You can go over that as far as you want, but a decent starting place. I think before, there was the assumption that you would go into the class, you'd write this chapter and you'd be done. And it's like, that's not quite how it works, because you're going to get different feedback along the way. The class is really to get you started, have a solid structure in place for you to build upon, and to really have all of the pieces kind of present in your chapter. You're gonna, expand and contract different sections as you go. And I think one thing that maybe both Zach and Reba can speak to is how much you have changed outside of the class structure, from Dis Prep 1 and from Dis Prep 2 to where you're now getting towards proposal very quickly. But I think that's one thing to just consider, is that the class is there as a way to structure you, to get you started. It is not the end all be all, and things will definitely change outside of that class, but you will leave with at least a lot more than you came in with, in terms of your topic, pretty much your research question, a decent draft, and 2 of your 3 committee members.
I think if I remember your original question correctly, I think the best piece of advice I got was from my current supervisor at the MSP clinic, which was that it's okay to just kind of literally put garbage on paper, in the sense that, like, if I'm reading an article, the thought that comes out might not even really be fully coherent, and it's certainly not academic, but it is enough for me to at least get the idea in the document. And then once I've actually like kind of sifted through all of the literature that I want to include for that section, then I can kind of go back and make it sound scholarly and sound cohesive and coherent. Because I know for me personally, I get really stuck on like wanting the sentence to sound perfect the first time I type it out. And I think for like a course paper that I'm doing the night before, like that's great. But for a dissertation, it's not, because it can be really time consuming to be like, okay, this thought needs to be perfect the first time it comes out. And now I've spent 30 minutes trying to do that when I could have gotten through 2 more articles that would have helped me write that paragraph to begin with. So it's just, I think, like, not expecting yourself to write the most perfect, amazing section of that part of your literature review or whatever it might be. I get stuck on that a lot. And so I just have to remind myself, like, just put the thought on paper. It doesn't matter what it sounds like.
Yeah, the notes too. The
Yeah.
notes as well, like you were saying earlier,
Yeah.
like just jotting everything down almost in a free write
Mhm.
so that everything in your head is out and then maybe you're able to focus on the topic or on the article or on
Yeah.
your thoughts about the article
Mhm.
or, the topic.
I would add to that too. I think, so we're talking a lot about chapter 2 because that's, if you're in just prep 1 now, that's what you're working on. And this is the chapter you start with. I think I'll say a couple of things. I think having a solid, and I think Stephanie, you were speaking to this, having like a good outline, which again, talking to your chair about that, like having a solid outline gives you a direction of like, okay, what do I need to go and at least start researching. I think one helpful piece of advice that I had gotten from my chair years ago when I did this was she encouraged me to write out my research question and always have it next to me, because it is easy when you start going through all this literature to get a little bit off track. And so always having that, like, no, this is what my focus is.
Like a guiding light.
Yeah, like a guiding light, exactly. And then just to piggyback off of your point, I think that is so important. I think one of the phrases, you put it more eloquently than I did, but sometimes I'm just like, words on paper, just put words on paper and figure out how to refine it later, especially in a class with writing chapter 2, and then in the second class where you write chapter 3, there's often with grad school classes, there are page requirements. And so that can feel daunting too. Like, okay, I have to reach a page requirement. So let me just, like, again, words on paper, start writing, and again, kind of making it sound scholarly or more academic later on.
I have a question.
Of course.
So like if there is a ton of research and you're trying to like, stay organized and like digest all this research and like take notes and everything you're reading, what are like the best ways you guys have found to like stay organized and like keep track of like all of that?
That's a good question.
Very good question.
I will say, I think it's very dependent on if you prefer to print your articles or keep them digital. And I'm very much so a digital person, because if I print them, they're just gonna end up like jumbled together, and I won't know what article goes to what. So for me, like, I organize it digitally. So it's like I have a folder that's like dissertation, and then I have like chapter 2 folder, and then in the chapter 2 folder, I have like articles that are for post-traumatic growth, and then even in that there's subsections. So it's like, for me, it's just literally putting the articles in folders based on where I think they will best belong. They might end up in other sections too, but that's what works for me. But I know like Emily prints her articles, so like I'm like, you do you, I can't do it.
I haven't already but it's all I have my articles, right?
Yeah.
So all my articles are labeled, and the labels have labels, and I have cubbies where my articles go for each section, so that I'm able to kind of conceptualize it. And the other, if I can chime in, the other thing that I did to organize was, I'm a visual person, and so I drew this, the idea came from a hormone monster, and I'm studying hormones, but I essentially drew this like figurine, and it wasn't straight lines that I had drawn, it was like my variables and my measures that I used to like create the hair and the face and the features. And it did become a monster at some point. It was up on my wall, and we all kind of had to look at it, but it was a visual representation, and that way I was always kind of engaging with it. Zach, do you have a process?
Yeah, I do something similar to Reba.
And before I get into that, I also love Zotero. That's a Stephanie favorite. That's more citations and keeping, but I have a lot of PDFs and subsections. But I think the biggest thing that might answer your question a little bit more is I was getting just lost in the research and what's important to what I'm writing. Dr. Cusick hit on the outline, and the outline was something I didn't realize was so important until you start the writing process, because I have my big bullets and then I have 50 articles. So once I really honed down my outline, and then I'm talking a very detailed outline, so outline, subsection, sections,
Yeah.
whatever. What I found myself is after I organized my article, I picked the 5-6 articles that I'm writing for this page and a half. And then I had all those articles pulled up, and then I'm synthesizing just that 5-6 articles. I'm not worried about the other 70 that I have stored away, because I would just get lost.
Yeah.
So a lot of it is reading, where does this fit? Where does it fit within my outline? And then when you're writing a specific section, just have the 5 to 10 articles for that specific section. Does that kind of make sense? Because I'm looking directly at that, I write it, and then they're kind of away for a bit once I go on to the next section.
Yeah.
So the outline was important, and then I do PDF folders as well with subfolders on my computer.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Thank you.
Of course.
Y'all make me so proud.
You taught us well.
That was one of the biggest shifts, because that was one of the biggest shifts for me, because I was just lost. I had 40 articles, and I'm like, what? I just looked at it, but it's in one of the 40 that I have on my desktop right now.
And the good
So
thing,
then having the outline and then actually pinpointing, okay, these are the 5 articles that I want to incorporate into these 3 paragraphs, I just start flowing.
yeah, and then you're able to know what you were reading, a part of that section, because a part of being sometimes getting lost in it is reading something and going, oh God, where did I read this? And now I'm typing about it. Who wrote this or who said this, right? So.
If I can just add to, I think just to add to the importance of saving a digital copy and not just a link is we've seen recent changes where in the government political sphere where articles and research is disappearing. And so we've had students here who had saved a link or, cited it and then went to go get it on a .gov site and it's not there anymore. So the importance of saving a digital copy or even a printed copy, but you have something that's this did exist. Again, that hasn't happened very frequently, but it's come up enough that it's just to be aware of it.
It has, and I think it's just a good habit to get into as you're starting to collect all of this literature. I think I think it feels overwhelming oftentimes because it's not just a course paper where you get maybe your 15 to 20 citations and you're done.
Right.
This is, you're collecting literature for the next 3 years, off and on as you need to. Really, the bulk is in the first year, but it's constantly evolving. You have to keep track of things, and things that you collected a year ago, you have to go back and reference sometimes to figure out did that change? Did it stay the same? Do I need to add more? And so I think those habits of how you do everything, how you collect, how you store, how you document, even how you name files, I think is really important to help keep you organized in this process, because it's a long journey that this is a living document. You keep coming back to it all the time.
Yeah, when you said that in the first course, I was like, okay, Stephanie, and now. What a difference. So we have about 9 or 10 minutes left. So looking back, I guess this could be posed for the whole panel if we don't have any questions or comments. Just looking back, what would you do differently in your topic selection stage? Oh.
I don't know if I'd do anything differently because I had a lot of different stages and phases, but I think that's an important part of research and narrowing down the topic. So I remember being very frustrated for a while about, okay, concussion and personality, what do I do? How do I do this? And it was frustrating, but I think that's part of the process. So I don't think I would have done that differently, because then I was able throughout that to get better grasp on what I wanted to do. And just kind of the overarching process of what it is to do research. It's not, you have a thought bubble and it's the perfect question, like it takes refinement, it takes time, it takes errors, mistakes. So I don't know if I'd do anything different.
Especially if it's your first introduction to research, which I don't know if that is the case for a lot of MSP students, but I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine it would be pretty daunting for a dissertation to be your first kind of
Yeah.
introduction.
Yeah.
Were you gonna say something? Sorry.
No, you're fine. I was just thinking as you were talking. I mean, it was my first major research, like introduction to anything major. The only thing I had done prior was like I said, a poster at a conference. So that's a minimal amount of research because it's a literature review, and then it was turned into a poster. So, I mean, yeah, it is scary when it's like I haven't even done like a research team before.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell are we doing? But something that I thought of that might help too with your question a little bit is, when I was starting to sift through my research, something that helped keep me on track in terms of like not straying too far from my topic, or I think topics, because it's really like chunked into like 3 different areas, but is you'll start to notice like names in your topic like that are really consistent. So like with post-traumatic growth, it's Calhoun and Tedeschi, and they're just all over the place. So it's like looking at their research helps me stay on track when talking about post-traumatic growth. And then similarly with like emotional neglect, like there's a couple of names that pop up consistently. So I mean, obviously like there's other research by other authors, but that kind of helped me stay on track too, because once I saw their name, I was like, okay, this is like in the arena that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Because even if it wasn't by them, then whatever was being written had cited them. So.
That's a good tip.
One other thing I would add now that I'm thinking about, if you're early on in this process or maybe in the master's program, thinking about a PhD or a PsyD, use class papers and other research activities to, if you have a broad stroke of health psych or concussions in my instance, do some initial class papers or research papers just to dip your toe into those categories. I didn't fully did it, but I did it 1 or 2 things and I was able to draw some inspiration from some of those papers. So probably do more about my specific topic 3 years ago, but I didn't know my specific topic. But if you have an interest, do some research or some small papers or class activities around that research.
Yeah.
So
I found that to be very helpful for my process also, like just kind of familiarizing myself with names or with literature to be, so it's not a fresh running start. I've kind of already started the race and it'll like jog.
Yeah, like I used our qual class to do, because in the qual class you have to do an interview, and I did it with a close friend and her experience of childhood emotional neglect. So it wasn't this specific, but it was at least like enough to give me the idea of like, can I interview other people about this? Can I even interview my best friend about this? Like, so that
And
was
what kind of questions too do I want to ask
Exactly.
and how to frame those.
definitely. So that was a good experience and helped me solidify the question.
Any questions or concerns from the audience? Comments? No cries of anguish yet from the tears.
I'm glad that you mentioned what you just mentioned about the qual class, because I believe those of us who are taking Dis Prep 1 are also in the qual class right now, and they haven't gone over like who you could really interview like when it's a subject of interest, but that's a good idea of having it relate to your dissertation topic. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, that was really helpful for me, and it actually solidified that that's what I wanted to do. So I recommend it if you already have an idea of what you want to do.
Especially if it's close to home.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely.
I have, if there's no other questions, I just had a couple sort of, what would you call them? Just tips? Yeah, tips or takeaways. I think the first one being, just broadly speaking, and I think everyone's spoken to this idea, I think the dissertation process is daunting, which is kind of why we wanted to do this symposium, like breaking it down, even just narrowing the topic, like this isn't done in one day. And so just that I'm not a runner in any capacity, but I'll use the famous, the runner's quote, like it's a marathon, not a sprint, is very much the case. You are starting to think about your topic in year 1, and whether you're on a 4 or 5 year plan, like that's how much time you're spending with this. So just kind of keeping that in mind. And then other things, again, for those who are in the process, who may be thinking about like applying to our program or another program, like it is doable. It is, I think things to keep in mind are like, again, who is your committee and who specifically can you lean on? And what's your working style and their working style? Like some students need like, give me very strict deadlines, and other students are very much self-starters and they'll just take it and go. And so, or are you somewhere in the middle? So I think thinking about that is important. I would say figuring out, and I think you all sort of spoke to this as well. What is your writing process too? Like sometimes it's like, are you someone who can sit down and work on this an hour a day every day? Or are you, yeah, so like
Chunks.
that's how I was too. Like,
Yeah.
I would spend weekends. Yep.
7-hour chunks.
Yep. Yep. I'd spend weekends, especially when I was doing my chapter 4, like the entire weekend, you know, but I could do that. Some people are, and that's not necessarily a healthy thing or good way to go about it either. Some people work more in smaller chunks, so a couple hours at a time. But I think figuring that out, if you don't know it, when you start a dissertation is important. And I would just say, again, staying organized in terms of like you all talked about with the articles, but also citing as you go. So don't like leave that to last.
Not the citation with the parentheses.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good.
Along with that, mastering APA style earlier on, because it's a real pain to go back and fix. And it's also, I'll say, speaking as a faculty, this goes, I guess, in course papers too. Like if I'm noting the same issue, like 10 papers in a row over the course of 3 years, like that's a problem. Like, are you not looking at like my feedback and integrating it? So kind of getting that sort of set early on with APA. And again, no one is perfect in APA, so there's not this expectation that it's going to be.
But you have
perfect.
experts that can help you
Yeah.
and point out, okay, let's go through page 1.
Yes.
These are the common 5 things I'm seeing. Go.
So that, which brings me to my second to last point, because I know we're at time. Use your resources, and librarians are such a huge part, obviously, of this process, and so helpful. Yeah, so helpful. And then when it comes to feedback, because we've talked about this idea of revisions, and you will get a lot of feedback from your entire committee. Just being open to that. So if you could be open to it and not like defensive, like they're really trying to help you and point you in the right direction. So those are my hot takeaway tips. So
I really like the last one because I think,
Yeah.
you know, feedback is hard to receive
Mhm.
and it's also hard to write. So, but I think it's always done in the best interest to help you as you're going through this process, especially as you're doing all these iterative drafts and like as your dissertation is growing chapter by chapter. So it does hurt sometimes.
Humbling.
But it also, like, again, the overall goal is at least altruistic.
Yeah, and the intention behind the feedback, I'm assuming, is like we are becoming experts, and this is a document that is binded and published, right? So we want stuff that is credible and makes sense for the reputation of MSP, but also ourselves. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming to our first day of Psychi Research Symposium Dissertation Style. If you have any, I guess, questions or concerns, write them in the chat. Our next day is next Thursday.
Monday.
Sorry. I need to change that on my calendar. And we'll be talking about how to write chapter 1, the IRB process, and then people who have submitted and passed proposal, as well as kind of contrasting between qualitative and quantitative methodologies. So that's in your wheelhouse and you want to come and chit chat, we'll be here.